Listen, you're not gonna find anything on me, okay? Trust me.
Empty your pockets into the tray, sir, or we'll have to. Your pockets, sir?
Lady, the problem isn't in my pants.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and it's a big week in X-Men. We get a full show to talk about two X-Men comics. X-Men number 19, the continuation of the Children of the Vault story, obviously that we got several weeks ago, as well as X-Men Legends number 2, Fabian Nicienza, Brett Booth, basically finishing up the origin of Adam X, the Extreme. And here with me to talk about that is the X-Men historian, the Marvel aficionado. Doc, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to talking to these two. I mean, they were the only two X books came out this week that mattered. I think they might have been the only two X books, but
so it's interesting. These two comics have a similar issue to deal with, is that they're packing so much information into one issue that you had to be clever on how you distributed the information to keep it exciting. And I think we got two kind of differing results. Now let's get right into it. We'll start out with X-Men 19 because obviously that's the mainline story. We've been waiting for the finality of this Children of the Vault storyline. I'll say this with the art with Mahmud Asrar just to begin with. I think it's much better in this issue. Some more detail. We got a lot more storytelling within the visuals. Obviously, as we're seeing the team of X-23, Sync, and Darwin age like 100 years as they're trying to escape the Children of the Vault.
it was better. I'm still not a huge fan of the coloring because from time to time it did muddy things up. But no, the art was good and it did convey that sense of time passing.
Yeah, certainly there was a lot of tension built through the art. I thought it was a step up. Before we tell the story, we got to talk about these charts because the vast majority of the story is actually told through charts, these timeline charts of where these three characters are together, then they separate, and they're going through all these trials and tribulations. And whenever you see one of these charts, the accompanying pages shows you one of the major events in the chart. So you get a ton of story actually displayed right here, and then you see part of the story following it up.
As much as I've been just outright ignoring the data pages in most of the X books for, oh God, probably about 6 months now, I just don't even read them. This was one of the times where it made sense to read them. This is kind of a callback. It reminds me a lot of whenever they did the Moira's timeline history in House of X and Powers of X. I don't remember what issue it was, but when they explained all the important kind of key dates and times throughout this this event, and this was, you had to essentially pack what, about 150 years from their perspective into essentially 2 issues, and that's a lot, even though they're all in one spot. Using these data pages with good layout to them, they were clear on who was who and what was what. It really did make a lot of it easier. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of the fact that you'd read through the data pages and get the highlights, but then the accompanying story pages basically just retreaded it.
Yes.
That
it wasn't perfect, but
yeah.
it did allow him to cram an enormous amount of information into a finite amount of comic book pages. Otherwise, this needed to be like a 24 issue like maxi series to explain everything that goes on.
For all the time that they wasted on X of Swords, and they're about to waste on a dinner party of X, they could have done a whole damn event on just this time with these 3 in the vault. And you know what? I think most people would have been like, hell yes, I will buy 24 issues of this.
Yeah, I would have been more in favor of that. There are some drawbacks, but he was able to cram an enormous amount of information. And I'm with you. These are the first information charts I've read since the very beginning of the Ten of Swords event, once I realized it was all a big waste of time. So let's get into the story that we are getting told. One of the first things we learn, besides what's happening initially with the team, the different generations of the Children of the Vault how they've been evolving essentially to meet the mutant threat. We also learn that the second generation were captured by Orcus and they were going to be used as weapons, and that's when Seraphina escaped. We've got this third generation, but because of the interference of X-23, Sync, and Darwin, they learn of the mutant nation of Krakoa and a new threat, and it ends up leading to a fourth generation of Children of the Vault, which wouldn't have been there otherwise.
Yeah, this wasn't an interesting exploration of the vault because it did kind of separate it from the world. While they function in a similar way, the evolution's much more directed and it's limited to the half dozen or dozen children of the vault rather than just kind of watching a society and seeing what the hell happens the way the world does. And it is much more guided evolution. It also put a limit on the vault and what it's capable of, because all of the versions of the Children of the Vault we've seen at this point, in my opinion, I don't recall ever seeing the second generation of the vault, at least out in the world.
They were captured. The only one we saw was Seraphina when she was basically sprung by Storm and Magneto, right?
Oh, yeah, you're right. I forgot that she had been, color reversed. Black hair with like gray face to white hair with black face. I forgot that she was inverted palette wise. But it also shows that there was a limitation on, while the world can pretty much evolve endlessly because it is just, let's see what happens, the guided evolution of the vault has limitations on it. And we learn that first they only needed one, then they needed a second, then they realized they needed a third. Now that they've learned of Krakoa and the mutants kind of all coming together, they learn that they need a fourth that they're not capable of doing at this point. It's beyond the world's limit or the vault's limits.
Yeah, so it's almost like the X-Men are their own worst enemy. If they hadn't sent this team of X-Men in there to basically recon the Children of the Vault, they never would have discovered their existence, and they wouldn't have known about the DNA of Darwin, which was essentially handed to them during an escape plan. They wanted them to think they were dead, so they cut his arm off. The Children of the Vault discover it, and they realize he is the key to this fourth evolution if they are to survive the emergence of the mutants on the nation of Krakoa. The X-Men are essentially their own worst enemy when it comes to evolution overtaking them.
Yeah, it's kind of this this trope that we've seen a lot used in comics, where the villains rise to meet the heroes rise to meet the new threat of the villains, and it's this endless cycle. And it's they're obviously playing with that trope here, where each evolves to meet the threat of the other. It creates an endless cycle. And you're right, while they chose 3 mutants in Wolverine or X-23, I will not call her Wolverine, X-23, Darwin, and Sync, that were truly built to handle this situation. Also, by putting mutants that were capable of handling the situation in there, they didn't realize that they were essentially handing the Vault the key to exceeding the limits that they didn't know that were already there.
Yes, they gave them the keys to their own demise. Now, we do know at one point they capture the 3 mutants. They essentially remove Darwin, and they keep X-23 and Sync together. And then we do get a rescue mission by an aging Sync, who apparently is over time fallen in love with X-23. He's able to rescue her. They're not sure what's going on with Darwin. So this was a nice scene. Did you feel like they should be in love at this point?
I mean, look, when you're the only 2 people for 100 years, you either grow to absolutely despise one another, like loathe the very existence of this other person, or you probably fall head over heels in love. I mean, I don't think there's a way to keep it, at least in this. I mean, I don't know if there's a way to keep it like really platonic and just be friendly with this, especially if there's any amount of tension, and interest between. I mean, hell, it's kind of biological imperative. But so yeah, I could get behind that. I like that. I like it.
So there's a cool part where I don't know if it didn't feel cool in the moment, but when they finally paid it off, I thought it was good. We have Sink. He's remembering when his father tells him like the difference between being in love and whatnot. And he says, "You know that you're in love if you're willing to die for them." And I guess that resonated with him through time. But here he realizes that's not the true test of love. As the two decide that they are going to make an escape, basically they go through this force field, they lose all their body hair and everything, and one of them is going to have to make it, the other one isn't going to be able to. X-23 says, I'm going to slow down their chase, you escape. So she's going to die for him, but more importantly, he has to live for her, because if he doesn't escape, they're not going to resurrect him. So I thought that was a really cool revelatory moment when you see what he meant by, like, he had evolved even further than his father's understanding of love, was that he had to live for her so she could be resurrected again and they could be together.
I like and dislike these kind of things because, first of all, they have enough time that they could both get at least out to the door, because all they had to do was get out the door, and then if they died out there, it doesn't matter because they can get resurrected and they retain their memories. But as long as they're inside the door, they can't. So X-23 isn't going to remember any of this. She's not, when she gets resurrected, he can confirm that she's dead, therefore they will resurrect her. But all of he retains his memories. She does not. And first of all, she could have gotten to the door and they could have just made their fight right at the outside of the door. That's fine. And then if they die, who cares?
I don't know. At this point, Doc, they've scouted the entire city. They know all the ins and outs. They know how fast the Children of the Vault are. I kind of trust them.
Okay. I mean, I understand it being if either of them are going to stick around, because after they went through that force field thing, both of them, in addition to losing body hair, lost their powers. Now
there was dampeners.
So Sink has no ability to. He doesn't have any offensive, like inborn on offensive capabilities. Whereas even without her powers, Lara still has her claws. So she had to be the one to stay back.
You did point out the tragedy in all of this is that she's not going to remember that they were in love, and he's going to know. And there will be likely some type of unrequited love moving forward.
Yeah, that's where I'm hoping it goes, like with the story beyond this, and it'll be interesting.
Absolutely. So I enjoyed this quite a bit. It was much better than the issue 18, in my opinion. So I'm going to give this one like I'm tempted to give it like a 4.5 star. I'm going to give it a 4-star because, I'm a curmudgeon.
Yeah, I think 4-star is about right. I think you gave the last issue like 2 or 2.5 star, but I said at the time this had the best chance of getting retroactively upgraded. And I would say when you read the 2 issues back to back, the first one's like a 3.5 and this one's about a 4 as a result.
All right, so let's move on to X-Men Legends number 2. Bobby Nicieza, Brett Booth telling the origin story of the Fourth Summers brother. And I'm just going to say this before we get into the story, which I had some issues with. The art is stellar. The action is beautiful. It's brutal. It's kinetic. It's everything you want in an X-Men comic.
The art in this is just off the hook. Even a lot of the talking head panels still had some degree of, they had energy to them. And that's what I want in an X-Men comic. I want energy.
Yeah, so you get that in full. Now let's get into the story, which I found was a step back from the first issue. We got a cliffhanger at the very end of issue number 1. It looked like perhaps Corsair had murdered Adam X. It turns out Adam X has a weird I don't know.
Physiology.
Physiology is, he basically, if you shoot him in the head, you don't kill him because his brain is actually in his butt cheek. And then we get a lot of weird dysfunctional family dynamics. And it goes on for quite a while.
First of all, putting your brain in your ass cheek kind of defeats the point of having a skull, because that's supposed to be there to protect your brain. That's a good way to get brain dead real fast, Adam. The Shi'ar didn't think this one through. But yeah, you know what? I did like, it reacted to the cliffhanger really quick. It resolved that. And we started getting that kind of bickering and the kind of typical Summers family dynamic.
There's a lot of that. Then we finally do get into the lineage.
Yes.
And Fabian Nicieza crams a lot into this comic book, and that's probably the biggest failing. I think you mentioned it last video. This probably should have been 3 issues rather than 2. It would have flown much better because this issue is far too compacted as far as information. But we do know that Adam X is not the full brother of Havoc and Vulcan and Scott Summers. He's actually a half brother. Half of his DNA is derived from their mother, and the other half comes from a Shi'ar donor.
Yeah, the other half is D'Ken. If memory serves me right, so is Vulcan. Vulcan's half D'Ken too, except for he was the product of D'Ken physically raping Catherine, whereas this time it was just in vitro fertilization, sort of, or whatever, test tube baby kind of thing.
That's not what it shows in the little family chart at the end.
Yeah, I know, and I was really confused by that because I'm trying to remember back to. I need to go back and reread X-Men Deadly Genesis again. Apparently, he's a half brother. And
a direct lineage to Emperor D'Ken, which is the real problem with the character.
Yes, exactly. So he's half Summers, half Naramani, and that makes him even the half brother of the half nephew, or just the nephew of Lalandra.
Yep. So we get the lineage out there. So he is a brother. He's a half brother. Havoc's the most excited person because he finally has a younger brother to boss around. When they don't get to do that all that long, but they do go into a rescue mission. They need to handle, I believe it's Eric the Red and the the Crystal Claws?
Yeah, that's the kind of strike team thing that he has.
So they decide to do it on the blue side of the moon, where there's been several historical conflicts. Between the Shi'ar Empire and the X-Men. It goes very fast because they've taken so much time to explain the lineage and have the family bickering that the plan is executed in about a page and a half, and they do rescue the grandparents of the Summers brothers. Kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah. It was a little anticlimactic. I was hoping for a little bit more. They did a lot of awesome different action scenes in the first issue, and this one, there was way too much exposition. Yeah. They had to exposition the plot forward rather than, it was a lot of tell, don't show, because otherwise it would have needed 3 or 4 issues. I mean, it's just that simple. But having only 44 pages to work with, they told a hell of a lot of story because that was a very, very dense backstory.
Yes, it was. And especially if you haven't read this recently, or maybe you're even new to it, it's a lot of, almost feels like gibberish at times.
Yeah, it takes a little. I mean, it was kind of testing my X-Men brain from the 80s and the 90s to figure out exactly where everything fits in here. And it did.
There's plenty of little call outs saying, hey, if you need to know where this came from, it's in this issue, all that stuff. But, do you really want to keep putting your comic book down and going back and finding old issues so you can remind yourself what the hell you're reading?
Yeah, I mean, I did really appreciate the use of editor's notes in this one because it's something that comics have gotten away from in recent years. So it was nice to have those back. They accomplished everything. They even had a backup plan with the Star Jammers, or not the Star Jammers, the Shi'ar Imperial Guard,
Gladiator and all them, and they're like, what the hell are we going to do? And then we get the final reveal why no one really remembers this, Doc.
Yeah.
It's because they've been mind wiped. Oracle made them all forget because they don't want anyone to know who Adam X is and that he's probably the rightful heir to the throne.
Yeah, well, if he's not the he's not the rightful heir, but he is a potential heir. Lilandra and Deathbird definitely have the inside track on it because they were siblings of the Ken, but him being the child of the Ken or one of the children of the Ken basically puts him next on the list after them. And theoretically, they could bump him past them if they needed to.
And he could be the source of civil war, certainly the source of assassination attempts. Although after what we saw, it appears that he could take out an entire species of people with his power to ignite people's blood. And they just want him not to be a threat, I guess.
Yeah, they really expanded his power set in this, in the fact that they basically said, yeah, he could pretty much take out an entire planet if they're bleeding.
Yeah. So
that's some absurd power level.
We get our Man in Black moment here at the end, but it's been what is it, like over 30 years since this had happened?
About 27, but 25.
Okay, 27 years. That. I don't think that he's going to remember. I think this was just filling in some blanks, but I don't think this is laying the seeds of the groundwork for future stories for Adam X to potentially reascend as a potential heir to the throne.
Yeah, I think that if anything, with any luck, they do use him and end up bringing him into the Summers house thing on the moon.
We got a fourth Summers, brother. People finally have the full story, and Adam X wasn't just some obscure character that was forgotten forever. Doc, I'm giving this one. It's tough. I want to give it a 3.5 star, but I'm going to give it a 3 star. I will recommend it because the art is fantastic, but the story is bloated. It just doesn't flow well.
I'm going to give it 3.5 just because I really, really do appreciate the art. It gets that extra half step from me. And I like the fact that they did address something that had been kind of a hanging plot point for 27 years, 26 years. But it could have been done better. I think that this story needed a little bit more room to breathe.
This is it for X-Men for like 2 months. I believe the next issue is in June. Isn't that insane? We're finally going to see Nimrod. At least that's what the cover looks like.
Yeah.
And the next X-Men Legends is going to be Walt and Weezy Simonson doing some X Factor. So that should be something to look forward to. And I'm actually pretty excited about that.
I am too. And I cannot wait for that. I will definitely be reading that, definitely be reviewing that. And it looks like it does have to do with Ship, exactly as I was hoping.
All right, buddy. Well, I do appreciate it. I had fun talking about some X-Men, and I will see you next weekend.
All right, brother.